I feel sort of like a waiter who brings out this amazing steak, and the people who eat it go to the waiter, "Man, that was the greatest steak I ever had." And you go, "Yeah." And you know that actually the cook cooked up everything. And you just kind of added the garnish, the parsley and stuff. That's kind of how I feel this morning, is that God cooked up a doozy of a story. And I just kind of get to serve it up. That's really my role this morning. So I want you to have fun with me. I want you to relax. It's kind of like a living room here, which I like. God is more after speaking to the longing of the heart than he is the craving for information. But God's not intimidated by scientists or science. He's not at all. In fact, it's not science that disproves God, it's scientists that disprove God or try to. And so I want to make sure that you're alert this morning to something. And that is that if you want to, God will satisfy your concerns and your doubts. But God will always leave you an out if you want one. He'll always leave you an out. You can wiggle out of his grasp if you try. But I'm telling you, it's going to be hard this morning. We're going to tell a story of international and intergalactic intrigue, a story of attempted deicide, narrow escapes, a chess game that took place over centuries. God left fingerprints, a trail of breadcrumbs about this story. There are lots of ideas out there. About 8 or 9 years ago, I thought to myself, well, that would be fun just to start exploring, and kind of read everything I could find. And, you go on the web and there you go. There's like all kinds of stuff out there. And I started reading through it, and I'm sort of deeply superficial about a whole bunch of things. Astronomy, and I'm a historian, and all that zodiac stuff. But I know how to ask really good questions. If those of you who know me go, yeah, okay, thanks, back off. And so I began to ask questions about these. And in fact, here's my favorite. If you can't explain something, you always invoke aliens. That's like, it was aliens. That's where the star came from. Well, so put on your CSI hats. We're going to be CSI Bethlehem this morning. Okay, it's going to be us. Yeah, you like that? That's me. So ready? Buckle up. Here we go. picture that you're looking at now is called the Hubble Ultra Deep Space Image. They took the Hubble telescope and they focused on what they thought was the darkest spot in the sky near the Milky Way. The spot that you're looking at now is no bigger than a grain of sand held at your fingertip. 200 sextillion stars. And it says he knows all their names. He said, I stretched this out by myself. I did it. I did it. There's about 1,000 galaxies there. The little things with crosses are stars, and the rest are all galaxies. Our Milky Way, if we were at the other end of the universe looking toward us, would be one of those little smudges. We live in a universe that has more galaxies than it's ever had people. The known universe is about 150 billion light years across, 125 billion galaxies. If we were to do a stack of pennies, one for each galaxy, it would be 120,000 miles high. It's just hard. We got to try to figure out a way to get our arms around how big this thing is that God's created. It's just about impossible. Well, maybe it is impossible. Our Milky Way is kind of a ho-hum galaxy. It's kind of middling in size. It's a bar spiral galaxy. Looks something like this. This is the closest one that we could photograph that looks like us. This is the M95 galaxy. It's 100,000 light years across. That's how fast light travels in a year. We'll talk about that in just a second. And we're in Antioch. That's us. We're in kind of one of the outer neighborhoods, not a real strong cluster of stars. That's us. You see our solar system in there somewhere? You see, the Milky Way to the universe is the same proportion as a grain of sand is to the Earth. Our solar system to the Milky Way is in the same proportion still. Earth to the solar system is like a grain of sand is to the Earth. In other words, things jump up 10 to the 7th power every time you move into one more order. So we're there. Now, if you were to look at the Milky Way from Earth, it would look something like that. That is, we look edge on into the Milky Way. Let's change our focus for just a minute. It always helps to look at things a little differently. And there we are. We're looking edge on into the Milky Way. God said to Abraham, look up at the heavens. That's what he looked at right there. And he said, if you can count the stars, so shall your descendants be. Well, if Abraham had tried, counting one star per second, it would have taken him 12,700 years just to count the stars in the Milky Way. And the Milky Way is one of 125 billion galaxies. You know, the universe might just be God's knick-knack on his desk. Have you thought about that? Think about it. Beyond the universe is nothing. Now, what's nothing? Can you imagine where there's a place where there's no up or down? There's no time. There's no radio waves. There's just God. God stands outside of the universe, and he looks at the universe. In fact, David got it right. All that time in the Bethlehem hills, he humbles himself to behold the things that are in the heavens. See, we look up at the heavens, and it goes infinitely far. God has to humble himself to even consider the heavens. He's amazing. He's immense beyond all consideration. Well, what about astrology? That was astronomy. Astronomy, you go, there's a God. What about astrology? God says this, don't lift up your eyes to the heaven and see the sun and the moon and the stars and the host of heaven and be drawn away to worship them. Did you know that, number one, God is the one who named the stars. He established the timing, the spin. Don't ever play billiards with God. He can put backspin on something. God established the exact timing of everything and named it. Jewish tradition said that God told Seth and Enoch the names of the stars and said, pass these names down to every generation. See, God had already made provision for salvation. When God created the stars, He already had provision within them for salvation. He already knew the day and the hour and the time. People on earth knew essentially the same name for the stars. The constellations and star names tell of Christ and salvation's purpose and of His coming in the future. Now, we have to get this. The stars point to but don't establish reality. Okay? They point to something that's happening. They say, hey, look, this whole story, the story of the zodiac, was obscured over time. On the morning of August 12th, 3 BC, in the eastern sky of Persia, Venus and Jupiter came into such a close alignment called a conjunction that they were by far the brightest star in the eastern sky. That happened in the rising sun in the morning in the constellation Leo. Leo was known across the whole east as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. It was associated with the Jews. Jews were scattered now throughout this whole area. And so you have Venus, which is the morning star. That should register with us. Venus is the morning star, aligning with Jupiter, the king star, in Leo. Venus was associated with fertility. And stargazers in the east looking at this go, huh, hey Malchus, check this out. So they're looking at this. They're watching it. They're wondering what's going on. That's what it looked like. There's Jupiter and Venus right there. Now, if you want to know kind of what that looked like in the night sky, oh, there's Jesus saying, I am the morning star. That should give us a clue. Here's this is December 1st of this year, looking from Olympia, Washington, up on Mount Olympus. And there was sort of a conjunction. That's as close as the two planets normally get together. And that's what that looked like in the night sky. Now, if you take those two bright stars and you put them just almost on top of each other, they're as bright as anything but the moon. And they're sitting right on the horizon, and it's like a blinking traffic light to people who understand the stars. And so they're paying attention to this. Why Sava, Persia? Good question. Marco Polo said that he saw the tombs of the wise men in a city of Sava, which is south of Tehran. I'm telling you that Iranians saved Christmas. Think about it. Iranians saved the church. They saved Israel. So let's start on the story. I want you to watch the words now. God has put breadcrumbs in these verses. And if you look at them, you go, oh, I get it. I get it. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod, Magi from the east arrived, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east. Now that doesn't mean that they were in the east and saw a star. It means they were looking east and saw his star. We saw his star looking east. And we've come to worship him. Now who were the Magi? Let me just say right off. If you think of the Magi as Jedi, you will not be far off. The Magi were these amazing guys. They were Medes. It was a hereditary priesthood, and they were trusted by everybody. And they would go from king to king and from place to place, and they would foretell the stars. They were mathematicians, they were astronomers, and they were astrologers, which was all one course you'd take back then, okay? It was everything 101. They were in Persia, town of Sava, Marco Polo said, and we already mentioned that. They knew of Daniel. See, in Daniel 5:11, Daniel is appointed the chief magi, the chief magus, which is the singular of magi, plural. Okay, Daniel was their chief. 600 years before this happened, Daniel was the greatest magi that ever was. In fact, they were so jealous of him at the beginning that they tried to kill him. Thus the story of the lion's den. Why? Because he supplanted them. But in the end, he was so beloved that he pulled them all in. They knew of the Jews. They knew, because Daniel was so focused on the Messiah, they too got this focusing on this Jewish Messiah. They knew the prophecy. They knew when Balaam said, I see him but not now, I behold him but not near. A star shall come forth from Jacob, a scepter from out of Israel. That was Balaam. They knew that. They knew that was going to happen. Oh, that picture down in the lower right, that is a Zoroastrian picture of the spirits that would speak to them. I don't know if you caught that, but look kind of like an angel. Looks like an angel to me. See that? See, God is not a respecter of persons. God will speak to anyone who wants to speak. So here we are, September 12th, 13th. Now this is almost a month later, and they see something happening. They see Jupiter go into conjunction with Regulus. Regulus is the king star, Jupiter is the king planet in Leo, and they're thinking to themselves, okay, a month ago, see, things happen slow in the sky. A month ago, we saw this sign. Now, Jupiter and Regulus are on top of each other, which doesn't happen very often, in Leo, and they're thinking, King of Kings. They thought a month ago, is born. So they are thinking maybe they ought to head to Israel. There's something even more amazing. It's kind of like those commercials where you say, wait, there's more. Wait, there's still more if you act now. This is God's picture of the birth of Christ. This is God's prophetic perspective of it. He says, a sign shall appear in the heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she was with child, she cried out, and the rest of it says that she gave birth to a male child. The dragon tried to kill the male child. She fled to the desert to hide. The dragon tried to kill her, all this. And it basically says a time times and half a time, or 3.5 years, which, if you were to put on a timeline, would come in at the end about 4 months after Herod dies. Okay? From when? The exact same time that the Magi are looking at Regulus and Jupiter in conjunction, the same day, in Jerusalem, this is what the sunset looks like. A woman clothed in the sun, the moon at her feet, with a crown of 12 stars over her head. This is a particular day. It's called the Feast of Rosh Hashanah, the Feast of Trumpets, the beginning of the 10 days of awe over the coming of God. 10 days before Yom Kippur, the high holy days. It's a new moon, and the moon is at the feet of the woman. I think we can say that we know about when Christ was born. I think he was born September 12th or 13th. The Feast of Trumpets always goes 2 days, actually. So it could have been 9/11. God has such a sense of humor. I'm just telling you. So we know. Now, we're going to chase a rabbit for just 1 second. That would put the conception late December 4 BC. The church chose December about 300 AD because they wanted to, by that time the church was preeminent in Rome, and they wanted to co-opt the festival of the sun. So they picked December 25th as the birth of Christ. I would guess December 25th, knowing how humorous God is, was probably the conception of Christ. Which ought to say something about when life starts. But anyway, here we go. But wait, there's more. So they are thinking, these wise men, getting wiser by the day, we should head to Jerusalem. But an amazing thing happens. Now watch. They're taking snapshots of Jupiter. They're tracking Jupiter every night. And Jupiter goes the normal, bang, goes in conjunction with Regulus. They think, well, maybe we ought to do something about this. I don't know. Jupiter stops. Jupiter goes backwards. Yep. Jupiter goes back in conjunction with Regulus, a double conjunction. Jupiter stops. Jupiter goes forward and goes 3 times in conjunction with Regulus. Whoa. This is called retrograde. It's actually an optical illusion. The planets back then were called wandering stars. They just thought they were all stars. They didn't realize they were a lot closer to us than the stars. Think of it this way. Think of you're driving out in Kansas where it's really flat, and you're going in a big circle, and it's about a 4-lane highway, and you're on the inside, and a big truck is on the outside. And way off in the distance is a house. So you're driving along, and you're looking at the house. Let me see the way, you're looking at the house, and the truck passes the house, right? Because you're all going the same direction. But you're going faster, and so you pass the truck, and in your view, the truck goes backwards. Now, the truck's not going backwards, but because you're turning an angle faster than the truck looks like it's going backwards. But then as you keep going forward, the truck starts going forward again. See, retrogrades happen all the time in the planets, but the fact that they happen like this, at this time, the first retrograde, you know, they're saying, let's go. We got to go. We got to go. Pack now. We got to go. Now, there's another, yet there's more. In each of the two retrogrades, the moon shows up. The moon, right at the time when Regulus and Jupiter, the King of Kings, are in conjunction in Leo, each night it happens, and it happened for one night, the moon shows up right next to the stars. And then the moon is gone. And then 2 months later, the retrograde happens again, and the moon is there again. The moon in Vedic or Eastern astrology stood for the mother. In fact, today, if you study Eastern astrology, you'll find the moon called the Virgin Mary. Because of this. Because they're looking and they say, the mother is with the King of Kings of Israel. Then it happens again, and they're thinking, now they are hightailing it. And they see again, his mother is with the King of Kings of Israel. So they start out from Sava, and they start heading. There's some interesting evidence that they went through Susa to pick up the treasure that Daniel had set aside. Daniel was a eunuch with no one to inherit. He was the second richest man. There's some tales that come from the East that that's where they got the golden myrrh and frankincense. They make the trip 1,200 miles. Caravans can go 16 miles a day with a good camel. 3 months or so, they show up in Jerusalem. Herod, the king, heard this, and he was troubled. Now, he hadn't talked to him yet. He just heard. He was troubled, and all Jerusalem were troubled. And they gather together the ones who ought to know, and they say, where is this King of Kings to be born? And they go, in Bethlehem, not the least among the leaders, in Bethlehem. And so they go, okay. Now, why was Herod troubled? We were in a time right now called the Cold War. The Parthians and the Romans were at war, and they'd been at war. Israel was a buffer country. Ownership of Israel went back and forth, and in fact, when Herod first became king, he had to run for his life to Rome because the Parthians had taken Jerusalem. While he's there, Augustus Caesar says to Herod, now catch this, you are the king of the Jews. So he comes back, the Romans take Jerusalem. The Jews are not happy about it. He makes Herod a non-Jew king who does this trumped-up thing, converting to Judaism. Why? Because he's paranoid, and for good reason. He actually killed 2 of his own sons, thinking they were going to overthrow him. There was not a day that went by that Herod didn't kill somebody out of paranoia. Not a day. Every writer who writes about him says, I can't even write all the atrocities that he created. He had a reign of terror over the whole area. So here comes the Magi, 30 years of, quote, peace. The Magi, who would be considered terrorists from the other side of the Cold War. It'd be like Russian spies in the 60s coming to America and saying to Kennedy, hey, where's the new president? I mean, so he's going, see, God used the phrase King of Kings because God knew exactly what he was doing. And so God says to Herod, where's the one who's born King of the Jews? And Herod's thinking, I'm King of the Jews. And he and all Israel are troubled because they're thinking war is coming. They're thinking these guys are spies. They're thinking, I'm not sure who they are. So Herod secretly meets with them. And he says to them, now, when exactly did this star appear? He's thinking, how old is the child? What age is this child? And he says to them, now look, you go search carefully for the child. Why? Because they could find him. If Herod sent his soldiers, no one would say anything. See, the shepherds heard about this child from the angels. The shepherds spread the word quietly in Bethlehem. In Bethlehem, which had a population of maybe 200, they knew of the child. There's maybe a dozen children born in that time period. They knew of this child. But they had not spread the word for fear of Herod, because they knew what Herod would do if they did to all of them. So they keep quiet. Herod knows if he sends soldiers, he's not going to get anything. So he sends the wise men and figures, how wise can they be after all? So he says, go and search carefully for the child. Now, if he's going to meet secretly, he can't do it in Jerusalem because all of Jerusalem knows what's going to happen. And in fact, the wise men, in order to see the star, have to be looking in the direction of the arrow. So how does this happen? At 2 o'clock in the morning, I wake up asking this question when I went to bed, and God says, Herod had another palace. And I was like, what? So from 2 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the morning, I looked for the other palace. There's Bethlehem, and there is his other palace. It's called the Herodium. The Herodium was the place that Herod went every time he was troubled, and every time he wanted to have secret meetings that the Jews couldn't find out about. So he goes to the Herodium. He calls on the Magi and say, come meet me in the Herodium. And he says to them, go and search for the child. So the Magi leave from the Herodium. Now, they want to go into Bethlehem under cover of darkness. They don't want to cause a huge scene. They're starting to catch on what's happening. So they figure, if we walk at dusk, we'll get there just after dark. Okay? Now, they've been tracking Jupiter this whole time. They've seen Jupiter every night. Jupiter was no surprise to them. But look what it says. After hearing the king, they went their way, and the star, which they had seen in the east, went before them. And when they saw the star, this is like the triple conjunction of joy. They rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. Now what happens? So here they are at the Herodium, and they head up the road, same road still exists, to Jerusalem, take a left into Bethlehem, 5.3 miles, maybe about 4 hours or so. And as they're traveling, here's what the sunset looks like. There's the sun going down over Bethlehem that day exactly. All they see is the sun. It's in their eyes. They're shading their eyes. They're walking. It starts to get a little bit dark. They're shading their eyes. They're walking. A little bit dark. A couple little stars come out. Starts to get a little bit darker. All of a sudden, they see in the night sky up in the upper left there, they see Leo. And they see something amazing. You can't really see it right now, but watch that star, the red one in the middle of Leo. You see that something else pop up there? Venus, Jupiter, Venus, Jupiter, Venus, Jupiter. Exactly. For one day only. For one day only. Venus and Jupiter came once again, a 1 in a 500-year conjunction, came once again into conjunction. And it only showed up at sunset as Venus and Jupiter were hanging on the horizon. And they look, and they go, that's the thing that we saw. That's the thing that we saw. That's what we saw. Whoop. And they're looking and they say, that's what we saw. And they think back to the time. And they go, that's it. That's what we saw. Look, that's what we saw rising. And now it's setting. And they rejoice greatly with great joy. And they go in. That's what they saw there. There are 4 favorable signs in Eastern astrology: Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, and the moon. Now, you might think of the Trinity. We already know who Venus and Jupiter are, and Mercury is the messenger. Those were the only 4 signs in the sky that night. None of all the other ones were considered unfavorable, and not one of them showed up. All 4 favorable signs showed up that night. They come into the house, and they see what? Mary. They see the child with his mother. And they go, that's what we saw in the sky with the moon. The child is with his mother. They fall to the ground and they worship him. I just want to kind of close with this. Isn't it wondrous that God's story in the sky is such an amazing, amazing story? It's an ongoing story. Isn't it amazing that only 400 billion billion stars, and a couple of Iranians and a frightened and faithful woman knew what was going on. And myriads of angels. See, God doesn't advertise the way we advertise. He doesn't do things the way we do them. God set this whole thing up way, way ahead of time. When He put the planets in motion, He knew the day and the hour and the people and Zoroaster and Daniel and every single detail, what Herod would do. He knew every detail. Every detail. You come to the thrilling conclusion, and it's like the best spy thriller you've ever heard, because it's got everything in it. Man, it's got potential infidelity, it's got attempted murder, it's got everything in it. It's a great story. It's a great story. One of the things I really love is this. So we see that Venus and Jupiter in Egypt try to obscure the child of the story, and God uses Venus and Jupiter in Egypt to protect and hide the child of the story. God says, yeah, come on. God is an amazing, amazing God. I was thinking about what to say, and I want to say this. Jesus is the star of this story. There's amazing circumstances, but I want you to think about your own story for a minute. See, you were the star of your story. There was a time in your life when you didn't know Him. And you could look back and go, well, then this happened. And then this happened. And then I had this conversation. And then I listened to this song on the radio. And then I had this dream about this. And then I gave up and gave my heart to Him. See, God has a story for you too. Now, He only does for kings of kings in these stars. But there have been 100 billion people who've ever lived, and there's 125 billion galaxies. I bet when you see Him, He's going to say, you know what? I got a galaxy with your name on it. And I want to show you the story that I painted for you when you were born. About your life. I want you to know how much I love you with the same love that I loved my son Jesus and still love Him. There's another part of this. Have you ever been in a Christmas pageant? You know, I played a donkey one time in a Christmas pageant. Yeah, I know, Chris, don't say anything. You're in a Christmas pageant. See, you have parts to play. In these stories where someone else is the focus of the story, you are a player in the story. You might be Mary and carry Christ to someone. You might be Joseph and just fill in all the background and make the money for it to happen. You might be the wise men. There are people all around you who have ongoing stories. And God leaves His fingerprints for you to go, aha. And if we'll open our eyes, we'll see that you are a star in a story in all the lives around you. You're the star. See, God didn't just stop with this and say, well, I guess that's done. No, He's working circumstances all the time. And when you think back about your own life, some of you are thinking right now and going, you know, that was Him. That was Him. I get it now. I get it now. I've been taking my way out. I think I'm going to stop taking the way out. That's a good thing to be thinking right now. But there's one thing I think that amazes me the most. And that is that in this little sliver of a speck of a dot, God said, I love that speck on a smudge, on a dot, so much that even though highest heaven can't contain me, I'm going to come down and I'm going to put myself inside of this little spot. That is the greatest example of miniaturization that has ever occurred. That the God who's for the universe is a knickknack would choose a little speck and become a child and be born. How amazing is His story? How amazing is His gift of Christmas to us? David could look down and see the child ahead. He knew what was coming, and he wrote about it. When we think about Christmas, there's a lot of things we can think about. But Christmas is first and foremost about the majesty of God. It's first and foremost about a decision God made to love us. David says, when I consider the heavens and the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have ordained, what is man that you should think of him, or the son of man that you should consider him? Yet you have made him a little lower than God. You crown him with glory and majesty. And he ends by saying, O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed God's favorite story, Christmas story. Ask yourself, God, what did you say to me just now? What did you say to me about me? What did you say to me about you? And that's the gift to hang on to for this Christmas. Thank you very much.